July 21st, 1973, Lillehammer, Norway, 10:40 p.m. Ahmed Bouchiki was walking home from the cinema with his pregnant wife, Toril. They'd just watched Where Eagles Dare, an action movie. Fitting, in a tragic way, two men approached from behind. One of them fired. 14 shots. Ahmed fell. Toril screamed.
Here come the runners now.
Ahmed Bouchiki died
Look
on
at
a
them
quiet
go, so
street in a
fast.
quiet Norwegian
the
town.
results.
He was 26 years old, a waiter, a pool attendant, an immigrant trying to build a life. He'd done nothing wrong, committed no crime, hurt no one. He just looked like someone else, someone dangerous, someone wanted, and that resemblance cost him his life. Within 48 hours, 6 people were arrested. Mossad agents, Israeli intelligence operatives, caught, exposed, prosecuted, imprisoned. It was Mossad's worst operational failure. A catastrophic mistake. An innocent man murdered, agents captured, methods revealed, allies alienated, and 50 years later, Lillehammer still haunts them. Not because of the publicity. Mossad has survived worse publicity, not because of the diplomatic fallout that healed, but because of what it taught them, about certainty, about assumptions, about the human cost of being wrong. This is not the story of the operation. That's been told.
Here come
this
the
is
runners
the story
now.
of the scar,
Look at them go,
the
so
institutional
fast.
trauma,
I can't wait for the
the
results.
lesson that was so painful, so public, so undeniable, that it changed everything that came after. This is the story of how one mistake in a Norwegian town in 1973 shaped intelligence operations for the next 50 years. And why, even today, when Mossad operatives are trained, they're told the story of Lillehammer. Not as a success story, but as a warning. To understand why Lillehammer haunts Mossad, you need to understand what happened before it. September 5th, 1972, Munich Olympics. Black September terrorists took Israeli athletes hostage. The rescue attempt failed. 11 Israelis died. Israel's response, Operation Wrath of God. Hunt down everyone involved in Munich. Eliminate them. Send a message. And for months, it worked. The operation was successful. Targets were identified, tracked, killed.
Here come the
Mossad
runners
was
now.
efficient,
Look at them
professional,
go, so
precise.
I can't wait
They
for the
eliminated
results.
Black September operatives across Europe, Paris, Rome, Cyprus, Athens. The operation became legendary. Proof of Mossad's capabilities, their reach, their determination. By July 1973, they'd been hunting for nearly a year. They'd killed multiple targets. They were confident, practiced, maybe too confident. The primary target remaining, Ali Hassan Salameh, the Red Prince, mastermind of Munich, Black September's operations chief, Israel's most wanted man. Intelligence suggested Salameh was in Norway, Lillehammer, a small town, quiet, perfect for hiding. Mossad sent a team, surveillance, identification, preparation. They found their target, a man matching Salameh's description. Dark skin, mustache, right age, right build. They followed him, watched him, confirmed, or thought they confirmed,
Here
his
come
identity.
the runners now.
They planned
Look
the
at them go,
assassination.
so fast.
Quick,
I can't
clean,
wait for the results.
public enough to send a message. And on July 21st, 1973, they killed him. Except it wasn't Ali Hassan Salameh. It was Ahmed Bouchiki, a Moroccan immigrant, a waiter, a pool attendant. A man who happened to look like someone else. A man who was walking home from the movies with his pregnant wife. A man who had nothing to do with Black September. Nothing to do with Munich. Nothing to do with terrorism. Just a man. In the wrong place. With the wrong face. And Mossad killed him. The operation fell apart immediately. Witnesses saw the shooting. Norwegian police responded quickly. The killers tried to flee. But Norway isn't a major city with easy escape routes. It's a small country. Limited exits. Within hours, 2 of the operatives were arrested. Dan Erbel and Marianne Gladnikoff. Caught at a train station. They had false passports, multiple identities, cash, the hallmarks of intelligence operatives. Norwegian police interrogated them. They stayed silent. Professional training. But their silence confirmed they weren't ordinary criminals. Within days, 4 more arrests. Sylvia Raphael, Abraham Gamer, Michael Dorf, Zwi Steinberg, 6 Mossad operatives captured, in custody, facing trial for murder. And the worst part, the victim was the wrong person. The news broke internationally. Israeli agents kill innocent man in Norway. The diplomatic fallout was immediate. Norway was furious. Israel's allies were shocked. The carefully maintained secrecy of Mossad operations was shattered. Israel initially denied involvement. Standard procedure: never admit, never confirm. But the evidence was overwhelming. The arrested agents, the false passports, the pattern of operations across Europe. Eventually, Israel acknowledged the mistake. Not publicly, not formally, but through back channels. Diplomatic acknowledgement. They'd killed the wrong man, and their agents were in Norwegian custody. The trial began in January 1974. Norwegian prosecutors charged the operatives with murder and conspiracy. The defense: they believed they were eliminating a terrorist. They were acting in national security interests, mistaken identity, not malicious intent. The prosecution: they murdered an innocent civilian on Norwegian soil. Whatever their intentions, the result was murder. The trial was a spectacle. International media, exposure of Mossad methods, details of training, communications, operating procedures. Everything that intelligence agencies work to keep secret was revealed in a Norwegian courtroom. In March 1974, verdicts came down. 5 convicted. Sentences ranging from 2 to 5.5 years. Norwegian prison. One defendant, Abraham Gamer, was acquitted on technical grounds but immediately deported. Mossad operatives, trained to be invisible, now imprisoned, photographed, named, their faces in newspapers worldwide. For an organization built on secrecy, it was catastrophic. The operatives served their sentences. Most were released early, between 1 and 2 years. Diplomatic negotiations. Israel pressing Norway. Eventually, they came home. But the damage was done. Not to the individuals, though they carried their own trauma, but to the institution. Mossad had always operated with a certain invincibility, a reputation, the best intelligence service in the world. Precise, professional, infallible. Lillehammer shattered that myth, showed that they could be wrong, catastrophically wrong, and when they were wrong, there were consequences, real consequences, not theoretical, not abstract, but arrest, trial, imprisonment, exposure. The lessons were brutal and permanent. The immediate institutional response was defensive, anger, blame. How did this happen? Who was responsible? Intelligence failures were identified. The identification of Ahmed Bouchiki as Ali Hassan Salameh was based on limited surveillance, assumptions, circumstantial evidence. They'd been hunting for a year. They were tired, pressured, eager for results. And when they found someone who looked right, they confirmed what they wanted to believe instead of what was actually true. Confirmation bias, the most dangerous trap in intelligence work. And they'd fallen into it. The operational security failures were also clear. Too many people, too visible. In a small town where strangers stood out, using methods that worked in Paris or Rome, but not in Lillehammer. They'd gotten complacent. Successful operations breed confidence. Confidence breeds carelessness. And in Lillehammer, that carelessness killed an innocent man and destroyed an entire cell. But beyond the technical failures, there was something deeper. Something harder to quantify, but more important to address. They'd lost their moral clarity. The certainty that their targets deserved to die. Because this time, the target didn't. Ahmed Bouchiki was innocent. Completely, unambiguously innocent. And they'd killed him. That reality, that undeniable, uncomfortable, haunting reality, changed something fundamental. The first change was procedural. After Lillehammer, target identification protocols were completely overhauled. No more assumptions. No more good enough confirmations. Multiple independent sources, photographic evidence, biometric data when possible, repeated surveillance over extended periods. The standard became, if there's any doubt, abort. Better to let a target escape than to kill an innocent person. This slowed operations. Frustrated field operatives. They'd see a target and have to wait, confirm, double-check, triple-check. But the memory of Ahmed Bouchiki and the 6 agents who'd been imprisoned for killing him made the delays acceptable. The second change was operational security. Smaller teams, less visible presence, better documentation discipline. The exposure in the Norwegian trial had revealed too much. Training methods, communication protocols, document forgery techniques. All now public knowledge. Mossad had to rebuild, new methods, new approaches, operating under the assumption that their old playbook was compromised. This required resources, time, retraining. It set back operations for months, maybe years. But it was necessary, because Lillehammer proved that getting caught wasn't theoretical. It could happen. And when it did, the consequences were severe. The third change was psychological. Harder to measure, but perhaps most important. After Lillehammer, Mossad operatives couldn't operate with absolute certainty anymore. They had to carry doubt. The knowledge that they could be wrong, that intelligence could be faulty, that the person in the crosshairs might be innocent. This created hesitation, internal questioning, the kind of moral complexity that intelligence work tries to eliminate. But that complexity was necessary, because the alternative, the certainty that had killed Ahmed Bouchiki, was more dangerous. The changes worked. After Lillehammer, Mossad operations became more careful, more precise, more selective. There were successes. Ali Hassan Salameh was eventually killed in 1979 in Beirut. This time, they were certain. This time, they got the right target. Other operations followed, more professional, more disciplined, informed by the lessons of Lillehammer. But the scar remained, not just in procedures or protocols, in memory, in institutional culture. Every new operative trained after 1973 was taught about Lillehammer, not as a cautionary tale in abstract, but as a real example of what happens when you're wrong. They learned Ahmed Bouchiki's name, saw his photograph, learned about his pregnant wife, the child he never met, the life destroyed by mistaken identity. This wasn't meant to demoralize, it was meant to humanize, to remind operatives that their targets were human beings, and when intelligence failed, innocent human beings died. That lesson, that humanization, became part of Mossad's DNA, a permanent reminder of fallibility. 20 years later, in the 1990s, Mossad operatives planning operations would still reference Lillehammer. Have we confirmed this? Are we certain? Is this another Lillehammer? The name became shorthand. For doubt, for the need for verification, for the awareness that certainty can be an illusion. Even operations that had nothing to do with assassinations, intelligence gathering, surveillance, recruitment, were influenced by the Lillehammer lesson. Check your assumptions. Verify your sources. Don't let desire for results override analytical rigor. These principles, burned into the organization through the trauma of Lillehammer, improved everything Mossad did, not just assassinations, but intelligence analysis, strategic planning, risk assessment. Lillehammer made them better, by showing them how catastrophically they could fail. The human cost didn't end with Ahmed Bouchiki's death. Toril Larsen, his Norwegian wife, was devastated. She was 8 months pregnant when her husband was murdered in front of her. She gave birth to their daughter 1 month later, a child who would never know her father, who existed because of love and would grow up in the shadow of violence. Toril spent years seeking answers, justice, compensation. Norway provided some financial support. Israel eventually paid compensation through quiet diplomatic channels, blood money, and acknowledgement without admission. But money didn't bring Ahmed back, didn't give her daughter a father, didn't erase the trauma of watching her husband die. The Bouchiki family in Morocco was also shattered. They'd sent their son to Europe for opportunity, for a better life, and he'd been murdered by a foreign intelligence agency in a case of mistaken identity. They demanded accountability, answers, justice. But what justice is possible when the killers were already imprisoned and the sponsoring government could hide behind national security? The family received compensation, apologies through intermediaries. But the loss remained. Ahmed Bouchiki was buried in Morocco, a funeral for a victim of a war he'd never been part of, a casualty of a conflict he'd never engaged in. His grave became a symbol of innocent victims, of the human cost of intelligence failures, of lives destroyed by being in the wrong place with the wrong face. And in Israel, though never publicly acknowledged, Ahmed Bouchiki's name was remembered, not celebrated, not honored, but remembered, as the man they should never have killed. The 6 imprisoned operatives also carried scars. Dan Erbel, Marianne Gladnikoff, Sylvia Raphael, Michael Dorf, Zwi Steinberg, Abraham Gamer. They'd been trained to be invisible, to operate in shadows, to never be caught, and they'd been caught. Photographed, tried, imprisoned, their faces and names public. For intelligence operatives, that exposure is traumatic. Their operational lives were over, burned, no return to field work, ever. Some adjusted, returned to Israel, found other work, tried to rebuild normal lives. Others struggled. The psychological weight of killing an innocent man, the guilt, the knowledge that their intelligence failure had destroyed multiple lives. Sylvia Raphael, the team's only female operative, became particularly haunted. She'd participated in the surveillance, the planning, the execution. She'd believed they were killing a terrorist. Learning they'd killed an innocent waiter shattered something in her. She died in 2005. Some who knew her said she never fully recovered from Lillehammer, that it defined her remaining years, a burden she carried until death. The others lived with it differently. Some maintained the killing was justified based on the intelligence they had. Some expressed regret. Some stayed silent. But all of them carried Lillehammer, the operation that ended their careers, the mistake that exposed them, the innocent man they'd killed. None of them would ever be the same, and Mossad learned from their sacrifice. Operatives are humans. They make mistakes, and when they do, the consequences are permanent. 40 years after Lillehammer in 2013, Norway officially pardoned the convicted operatives. It was a gesture, a closing of the chapter. The operatives had served their time. Decades had passed. Relations between Norway and Israel had normalized. The pardon changed nothing practically. The operatives had long since served their sentences, but symbolically it mattered. It said this happened. It was wrong. Justice was served. Time has passed. We can move forward. But moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. And Mossad hasn't forgotten. Even today, in 2020s, Lillehammer remains part of training, part of institutional memory, part of the moral education of operatives, not as ancient history, as relevant lesson. Because the temptations that led to Lillehammer, pressure for results, confirmation bias, assumptions, still exist, and the consequences of failure, dead innocents, captured operatives, exposed methods, are still catastrophic. So they teach Lillehammer. Every generation, every new operative, the scar that won't heal, the mistake that can't be unmade, the lesson that must never be forgotten. Some intelligence failures fade into history, become footnotes, lessons learned and filed away. Lillehammer didn't fade, because it was too public, too clear, too undeniable. Ahmed Bouchiki was innocent. There was no ambiguity, no gray area, no "he was a threat anyway" justification. Just a man who looked like someone else and paid with his life. That clarity, that undeniable, uncomfortable, eternal clarity, is why Lillehammer still haunts Mossad, because it can't be rationalized away, can't be justified, can't be explained as necessary collateral damage. It was a mistake, pure, simple, catastrophic. And mistakes like that, ones you can't deny or minimize, leave permanent scars. The broader lessons of Lillehammer extend beyond Mossad, beyond intelligence work, to any organization that operates with lethal force. Lesson 1. Certainty is dangerous. The most catastrophic failures come from being absolutely certain when you should be cautiously doubtful. Lesson 2. Confirmation bias kills. When you want to believe something, you'll find evidence to support it. Rigorous verification isn't optional, it's essential. Lesson 3. Success breeds complacency. Mossad had been successful for months. That success made them careless, overconfident, and overconfidence led to failure. Lesson 4. Institutional memory matters. If Lillehammer had been hidden, forgotten, minimized, the lessons would have been lost. By keeping it alive, teaching it, remembering it, acknowledging it, Mossad ensured the mistake wouldn't be repeated. Lesson 5. Human costs are real. Ahmed Bouchiki wasn't an abstraction. He was a person with a wife, a child, a life, remembering that humanity prevents future dehumanization. These lessons apply to military operations, to policing, to any situation where force is used based on intelligence that might be wrong. Lillehammer is a case study in what happens when systems fail and humans pay the price. 50 years later, the question remains, was Lillehammer worth it? Not the operation. Obviously not. Killing an innocent man is never worth it. But the lesson, the institutional trauma, the permanent scar, was it worth it? Did it make Mossad better? Did it save lives by preventing future mistakes? The evidence suggests yes. After Lillehammer, Mossad's target verification improved dramatically. Mistakes became rarer. Innocent casualties decreased. Not to zero. Intelligence work is never perfect, but better, more careful, more aware. So in a terrible way, Ahmed Bouchiki's death served a purpose. Not the purpose his killers intended, but a purpose nonetheless. His death taught a lesson that saved other innocents from the same fate. That's not justice. That's not redemption. That's not enough. But it's something. A meaning salvaged from tragedy, a lesson learned from failure, and that lesson, etched in memory, taught to every operative, impossible to forget, is why Lillehammer still haunts Mossad. Not as guilt, as responsibility, as reminder. That certainty kills. That intelligence can be wrong. That targets are human. That mistakes have consequences. And that some scars should never heal. Because healing means forgetting, and forgetting means repeating. Lillehammer can't be repeated, won't be repeated. Because Mossad remembers. Every operation, every target, every decision. Lillehammer is there, in the background, in the training, in the procedures, in the doubt. Are we certain? Have we verified? Is this another Lillehammer? That question, asked 1,000 times in 100 operations over 50 years, has prevented other Ahmed Bouchikis from dying. That's the legacy, the scar, the haunting, a mistake so catastrophic that it changed everything that came after. 2 decades later, 5 decades later, forever later. Lillehammer still haunts Mossad. Because it should. Because some mistakes are too important to forget. Ahmed Bouchiki, remembered, named, humanized, not as a footnote, as a person, as a lesson, as a permanent reminder of what happens when intelligence fails and certainty blinds. That's why they still teach it, why they still reference it, why they still carry it. Not as history, as present, as the scar that won't heal, and shouldn't. Every operation has more than one story. Most channels tell you about the successes, the brilliant operations, the perfect executions. We tell you about the failures, the mistakes, the scars that don't heal. Because those stories matter too. Maybe more. Because they teach what success can't. Subscribe for the lessons they don't want to remember. The failures that made them better. The scars that refuse to fade.